Good morning, everyone. My name is Mark Taparaskis with Microsoft, and welcome to Continuous Integration and Deployment. Today we have Gerald Versluis from Holland to give us about introduction on CI. I'm not sure if it's CI and CD, but I'm sure he'll fill us in on all the acronyms. So go ahead, Gerald, take it away, please.
Welcome, everybody, and thank you, Mark. Like Mark said, my name is Gerald Versluis from Holland, and thank you very much for having me here for this Xamarin University guest lecture. I'm really excited to be doing this. I really think Xamarin University is great. I graduated from it only last month, so I'm a certified developer as well. And so I'm very happy to be able to contribute to Xamarin University in this way, and yeah, to show you something awesome, I hope. So let's get started. First, let me tell you a little bit more about myself. There is some info if you want to contact me later. I'd really love to hear after this session what did you think of it. So these are ways to contact me. Like I said, my name is Gerald. I'm from Holland. Right now I am a senior developer at a company called Cambit. There I develop basically anything on the Microsoft stack, but I am mostly focused on building apps with Xamarin for a few years now. Also, I have my own company with which I'm trying to invent that $1 million app, so I don't have to bother with working for Cambit anymore.
I like your goals. So, your $1 million app. That's you need to set your sights higher. Go for $2 million.
Yeah, right.
Can you unpause your screen share? I think we're still on the title slide.
That is a shame. So here we go.
Excellent.
Now you see me, right? Okay, great.
Thank you.
That talks a lot easier. Okay, so this is me, and here's my contact info again. So I work at Cambit, as I was trying to show you, and also my own company with which I'm trying to invent that $1 million app. And like I told you, as of last month, I'm a Xamarin certified developer, as you will be soon, hopefully, or maybe you already are. If there are any questions, just type them in the chat window. Mark will notice and he will interrupt me if necessary. Maybe I'll see it before him, but just ask questions right then and there so I can jump into them right away. Okay, so let's get started then. Today I will be talking about CI and CD. That's how you could call it, Mark. One note on beforehand, I will probably use the terms deployment and delivery after each other. Technically, they are both different things, but I will be talking about it as one thing. I mix them up all the time. So deployment, you could see technically the term would mean that you deploy your app every time it's built, basically. So you have proof that you can deploy it every time. You don't have to do it, but you can. And delivery is basically that you continuously deliver your app to some form of end user. So that can be the actual end user, but it could also be beta users or something. Now that Microsoft has bought a HockeyApp, I think last year, and Xamarin this year, they suddenly have this awesome tool set and they are a very big player in mobile development, and if you mix in the TFS they already have, they now have everything in store to provide you with the best tooling you can imagine for setting up your own CI and CD, and it's all free as well, so that's awesome. I'm going to show you this today. I hope you will like it, and you can, because it's free and it's all available today, so you can go out here and work with it immediately. This is the case I will be using. We won't be doing any code or in-depth app showing. But just so you get a little idea of the app we're trying to work with, so you won't wonder what this name Boodschappie. It's actually Dutch, so you probably wouldn't understand it. What it means. So let me quickly go over this. Boodschappie is a little app. Me and a couple of colleagues are. This could be the $1 million app, by the way. We are setting up. It's a fairly simple app. It's for creating a shopping list, a common shopping list. So everyone can request a couple of groceries for someone which is going who is going to the supermarket, and then they have this one list compiled, and they can scratch off what they got and get groceries for the whole company instead of just going all out themselves. So that's some basic background info on the app I will be demoing with today, although you won't see the actual app. So this slide you've probably seen before if you have followed some Xamarin sessions before. Xamarin is a better way to build, test, monitor with the complete suite underneath it. And today I will be showing you mostly about, well, integrating and a bit of monitoring. I will also hit a bit of test cloud, but I won't go deep into that. So continuous integration. CI stands for the process of automatically building and verifying that it still builds. You all probably have encountered the "it builds on my machine." You are working on your code, it works on your machine, and that's great. But if you're working in a team, that's not going to cut it. Or if you do a clean checkout one day, you find out that it's not working. So as a developer, you want that kind of feedback on your code ASAP. You want to know if your code still integrates with other code that developers are working on simultaneously. Another thing that happened to me, I don't know if it happened to you, I can imagine, that the source control system didn't notice that you added a source file. So when you check in, it doesn't get committed, and it doesn't build when you check out the next time. Or even worse, if you do a clean checkout and you deleted your local repository, then your code is just poof, it's gone, and you'll have to do a lot of work again to get it building again. Also, if you have unit tests, then you can run them automatically as well. So then when you have created some new feature, you check it in, and you will get notified if unit tests fail or not, of is they're still working, which tells you if everything is still working as expected. So that feedback loop you want to have as close as possible. You want to know within minutes if your app still performs to the standards that you have set for it. So like I said, Microsoft now has this full pipeline. It has everything to offer you to set this up. It all starts with VSTS. Maybe you know it as TFS Online. Nowadays you can choose between the TFS versioning system or Git. If you choose Git, it integrates easier if you want to use other systems. Then you can open up VSTS and let your Git repository be checked out by third-party tools. So if that's something you want, then you should choose Git. If you're gonna have it in VSTS anyways, then you can use the TFS versioning control as well. But well, Git is hip and happening, so you should probably go with that. Of course, you will need Xamarin for it. Which we're going to see in a little bit. You're going to need an app, which it doesn't even have to be a Xamarin app. You can also build Android apps with this the same way. Xcode projects as well, I think. Then that's a bit of continuous delivery or deployment already. You go to HockeyApp or Application Insights, with which you can distribute your app to your end users, and you can monitor your app when it's out in the open. Also, there is, of course, the test cloud, which nicely integrates with all the systems that you see here. But it's optional. It's up to you. You need to make those tests and integrate it into your pipeline. It's optional. We're going to see a little bit of it today. So VSTS is awesome. It's like I said, most of the tools you're going to see here today, they are free to some limit, to some extent. If you haven't seen it before, it's much more than just a versioning system. You can do so much more with it. We won't see most of it today. You can use it for creating your work items, assigning work items to people. You can have the best traceability you can imagine if you keep everything in VSTS. It's very extensible. Microsoft now added a marketplace to it, so developers can go out and create their own build steps, as we're going to see in a little bit, or widgets that you can place on a dashboard. I think in the near future they're also going to come with a paying model for it, so you can actually earn money with the extensions that you put up there. And it does everything that a on-premise TFS does, but even better and sooner, because TFS Online now already gets the latest updates. They're rolled out because, well, it's a cloud service. It's from Microsoft, so that gets the updates first. And then for the on-premise TFS, you have to wait for the quarterly update then before your system administrator wakes up and decides to approve it and install it and such. So, like I said earlier, Microsoft now has everything to set up this pipeline. They just forgot one thing, or maybe they couldn't add it because of licensing, I don't know. You have to bring your own Mac to this party if you want to actually build iOS apps. They don't provision a Mac system for you, so you could set up your own Mac Mini. I will elaborate on that in a little bit. Or you could go with another cloud solution, which is called Mac in Cloud. There are probably more. Mac in Cloud is one of the a known one. So what it basically does is they set up a Mac for you. They give you the credentials, and you can use it in your building pipeline. So you can control it and send your source files over that, compile it, and then get it back to VSTS. So that's one thing that you might want to look into when you're starting with this. So let's see a little bit of this in action, then maybe you'll get a better view of it. Okay, so let's get this out of the way. If you haven't seen it before, this is Visual Studio Team Services, also known as TFS Online. This is actually the first that you'll see. This here you see all the projects I've been working on for myself. There are probably a lot more. This is just the recent ones. So if I go into this Boodschappie one here, you go to the actual project dashboard. Like I said, this is completely to your own imagination. You can add all kinds of widgets, which can also be here added from the extension gallery. If you're really good, you can add extensions for yourself. And if we look here, you already see some things with what has to do with building your apps. So you can also see it up here. You have code work and build and release, as we see in a little bit. So let's go to build for now. And here you can create something which is called your build definition. With your build definition, specify which steps you're going to take to build your project and what's going to happen to the project. So if we create a new one here, you see there's already a lot of templates available. You can create an Android app or do something with Azure Service Fabric application, a universal Windows platform, and here you have the Xamarin ones and even the Xcode one. If you're feeling hardcore, then you can go for a completely empty one and build it for yourself. It doesn't matter what you choose. It's like a Visual Studio template. It's just it doesn't do anything more than set up a couple of default steps for you, but you can completely customize it afterwards. So if I here choose a iOS one, and you can do some settings for the repository that you want to use. As you can see by the icon here, I'm using a Git repository for this project. You can choose whatever branch you want. And here you can set up the continuous integration, actually, which is nothing more than just saying, okay, whenever I check in code, I want this build definition to go off. Also, something interesting is down here. This says something about your agent queue pool. Here you have default and hosted. So if we were to think back about this little image here, this is actually the Mac Mini that I have set up solely for building Xamarin iOS apps. Actually, it does the Android apps as well. It just sits here on my desk. It has nothing more than just a network cable and a power cord, of course. That's still wireless as well. And it just has to be connected to the network. Then you install it with a simple service app, which is really easy to set up from VSTS as well. And you can use it as a build agent. So that's what is in my default agent here, in my default agent pool.
Question, Gerald?
Yeah.
What about Xamarin Forms?
Yeah, that's a good question, actually. Xamarin Forms is supported. Actually, this app I'm talking about is a Xamarin Forms app, but Xamarin Forms, of course, is nothing more than just an extension on the Xamarin.Android or Xamarin.iOS. So for VSTS and for building your application, Xamarin Forms doesn't exist. It's just a NuGet package for that project. Does that make sense?
So what would the steps you'd need to do, just quickly overview, like to create one of the build definitions for the Xamarin Forms project? You wouldn't start, like there wasn't a template for it, for example, right? So
no, because that's what I'm trying to explain. There is this is going to sound weird. There is no such thing as a Xamarin Forms app because Xamarin Forms is an abstraction layer above your Android or iOS app. So when it comes down to it, when you look at it from a building perspective, it's still an iOS or an Android app that you have installed the Xamarin Forms NuGet package. That's fine. That doesn't matter. So it still builds if you want to build your iOS app. It can be a Forms app. It doesn't matter.
Right. So you'd create three. You create a Xamarin iOS app, a Xamarin Android app, the head project's a UWP app, right? And then add forms to that.
Can. Yeah, that's one of the things. You cannot add one build definition for all three apps. You have to create 3 build definitions for the 3 separate apps.
Cool. Thank you.
Or at least, as we'll see in a little bit, you can do it in one, but I don't think you'd want that. So that's one thing you have to keep in mind. You have to set up a Mac Mini or rent a Mac in cloud to be able to do this. So if we go back to creating a new build definition, let's see how that looks like. So iOS continues. What I was talking about here, the hosted one just pulls out a machine on Azure. and builds that for you. But the machines on Azure don't have all the tools you might want for building these kind of apps. iOS is a very specific one. You always need a Mac and Xcode installed on a Mac, so that's not something that's provided with the hosted build agents. If you are using default .NET ASP projects, then hosted build agents are fine. If you want anything beyond that, then you can install your own build agents, which can be a Mac, it can be a Linux machine even, I think. It can be a Azure VM, which you have configured the way you want. So if you then create a new build definition, you see a whole lot of red alarming stuff here, but you get a few default steps, which includes activating the Xamarin license. I'm not really sure if that's still necessary because it all went kind of free, but you need to do this anyway, I think, which is nothing more than just activating the actual license, because you have a couple of seats with your Xamarin license. So you're going to have to activate that before building is even possible. Then you're going to build the solution. You can do something with tests like I want, and then you're going to deactivate the Xamarin license. Now,
this is a question, Gerald.
Yeah.
So if your question coming in, if they say if their Mac is at home, how does VS Online communicate with it?
All right, that's a good question. If you would go to the configuration, I did that in the upper right here, then you would go into this project settings here. You actually see that agent queue here as well. So if we were to go to here, then you see the same options I had in when I created a build definition, which is the default and the hosted. Actually, the hosted, like I said, that's something which is provided. It's probably some Azure machine, or machines. I can imagine everyone who's using VSDS has this hosted agent. So this is just some shared thing. You can create new pools with any name you want. I just chose the default one. It's automatically there. And as you can see here, this is the Mac. This is the actual Mac that you see in the image here, which sits on my desk at the office. So what I would just do is say here download agent. I'm actually on a Mac now, so if I say download agent here, it will see that I'm on Mac OS. I can download it, and it gives me some instructions on how to configure the agent. It's literally 3 steps, and you've got it running. So that's it, and then it will, I don't know, let me see. I think that if you download it here, it already incorporates the settings file, which will connect to my my own Visual Studio account. So if you do that, you will see it here in this list going up, and you can use it as a build agent.
Cool, thank you.
Okay, so this is an empty build definition. I could go configure this all here, but let me just delete this one and go to one I've set up before. Here you actually see a configured one. This is the Android CI, so this one goes off continuously. Whenever I check in code, this goes off. First thing you see happen is to restore the NuGet packages, which is a very logical step. I don't have much to configure here. You see here in the middle, you'll see all the build steps that it's going to take. And when you switch over, you see on the right hand all the options that you have to configure. Some of them are required. If you don't set them, it will turn red again. And whenever you, whenever you do fill it in, then it stops complaining. So depending on what step you have here, you can configure everything about your build process. So the only thing I do here in my CI is to, this is actually a bad example, is just to verify that it's still building. Another thing that you want to do here is do some unit testing to verify that that's all correct as well. We did actually have the test cloud in our CI as well, but because that can be a long run, we did that one apart from this one. For some simple tests, you would be running it for 15 minutes at least. So that kind of breaks the feedback loop that that you want to have. You want to have quick response. You want to know if it's still working. But this is completely up to you. If you want to have the test cloud in here, that's no problem. You can do that. So you can just add a build step. You'll get like a same sort of dialogue again, now with a lot of more options, and there are probably a lot more to come. They are separated into different categories. Let me just take all here. There are some deprecated as well, and it varies what you can do. You can archive files. You can Azure file copy. It's not all relevant to Xamarin apps because you can build. There's one saying if it has a command line, then you can automatically build it. So you can do anything with this. Run a batch script. It's all there. Even HockeyApp, as we'll see in a little bit. So that's just great. And also in here should be somewhere, here, the Xamarin Test Clouds tab. You can just add it like this. You see it popping up in the background, so you can add multiple steps before going on. You can just drag it up here. You can imagine that in the order in which things are done can be important. You don't want to restore your NuGet packages as the last step. It doesn't make any sense. So actually, this doesn't make any sense as well. You want to build it first, then whatever you have built, you want to send to Test Cloud and do it. So also here you have some required fields that you have to set up. Your app file, it seems a bit important. So in the case of Android, that would be your APK file, your team API key, which is the API key from Test Cloud, your user email address, devices, which is a base 64 kind of string for which devices you want to test, etc., etc. We will see more of this in a little bit. So if I look at another one, we have a nightly build as well. Actually, let me explain this. What you just saw was actually compiling your build definition. What you see here is the actual build runs. So this is a nightly, so we would expect that it runs, well, every night, 29, 30, 31, up to 16 hours ago, we got another version. And if we were to go into this is the actual run of this build. So here you see the version number, which is something you can automate as well. And here you can see all the steps that are also in this build definition. Together with, if I click one, you will see the log coming up. And if something went wrong, you can find out what went wrong here. This should look familiar if you ever looked into the output window of your Visual Studio. You can also download all logs as a zip. So let me go into this definition quickly. It does a little bit more. This also has a step of versioning your assemblies. It does a regex pattern, regex, what do you call it in English? I'm not sure. Sorry. A regular expression on the file that you specify. So in the case of Android, you want to do a regular expression on the Android manifest.xml, and it just does a simple replace with the version that is specified by TFS. Because as you may have noticed here, there are a lot of tabs. You have here the options. You could build multiple configurations at once if you want. Create a work item if you're familiar with TFS. Like I said, you can also go create work items and your Scrum board and everything in here. I'm not going to go into that. Here you can configure the repository that we started with. But here's is also something interesting. You can do variables. So these are fields that you can that can have a variable value. So here you see the build configuration. These are static, so you can do nothing about this. You can, however, use them in your build steps as well. But here we have the build configuration, so this would be release or debug or whatever configurations you might have for building. And here you can say you can allow it at queue time. So this means you can change them whatever I say queue build. I can also queue a build manually, not just continuously. I can do it here manually as well. And you'll see here this build configuration, you can see it set allow at queue time. So if I were to remove this, I'd have to save it first. And if I were to queue it again, then you see I can't change this variable here. I can add one if I want. How to use it, I'll come in a little bit. But also it's very useful for setting passwords and other secret information in here. Because normally if you would go back to the build steps here and you would activate your license, this is just a plain text field. So you would enter plain text in here. That's not something you would want. So if you put it in a variable, you can use the variable name here. That's not a secret. And you can mark the variable as secret with this lock here. And you immediately see that it becomes some kind of password box. So that's the way you want to hide your information. Another advantage of this is that you can use it to, I can use this variable in all steps right here, but I can also put something in a variable here and use it later on. So that's really useful if you have some kind of, there's also a lot of built-in variables. You can use that to determine where you're going to put your stuff on the file system, and you can pick them up later on. So if I'll probably show you that in a little bit. Here you have something, the trigger. So this is a nightly, so I want to have this scheduled every night at 3, every weekday. You could just do work days as well. And here you can also say, you can filter on branches here. So you can say include or exclude, and I don't have any other branches here, but if I would, then I could say, okay, if something is checked in this branch, then I want to include it. If something is checked in another branch, I want to exclude it. So that's the scheduled. If you would want in the CI one here, then the trigger would be continuous. So like I said, each check-in, this build definition will go off and go out and do all the steps that you saw in your build definition. Also here you can do not only branch filters but also path filters. So here you can see it's all in one big repository, and because it's continuous integration, you also see the API project here, the backend. We noticed that at one point, if we checked in code to our API, then it started building a Android version as well. That's not what we wanted. So with path filters, you can say, okay, only if something gets checked in on my Droid folder, then this build has to go off. So that this gives you more control over how you want to trigger your builds. Yeah, I was talking about the version number. Let me go back to the nightly for now. So if you go here into general, you can also set the build number format. So if we're going to look at this, this is just 1.0.0, and here you see another thing you can do with variables. Whoops. This sets the revision, and it adds it as .r. So if we look at the zoom back actual builds, okay, you see that this number increments nicely. That is something that is built in. We don't have to do anything for this. That's what I did with that rev variable at the end. And what we can do with that is pick that up and replace that here in our Android manifest and use that as our version code for the app we're going to distribute as well. So we do that before we go to build anything, so we have the right version in our Android app, which is going to be built nightly. So another thing you see here at the end is these steps are going to create our app. For our Android app, we also need to sign our package for iOS as well, but it goes a bit different. And here the last one is something interesting as well. You see here publish artifact. Artifact is a term in continuous integration land that is used the name for the actual files you are going to deliver to your to whatever, actually, to your continuous delivery, but also you could use it for delivering it to your testers at your company. Artifacts are the actual binaries that you are going to deliver. I'll show you that in a little bit. Actually, let's show you now. If we go to the actual build runs here as well, you see all the results, so all the steps, etc. Here in the middle we have some kind of dashboards. We have a timeline, so we can see how long every step took. And also here we see the artifacts. We can browse through it here online, explore. You can download it as a zip. And here you see, well, in this case, it's just the APK file. So this is the outcome of your build, basically. Other things you see here is code coverage is not available for this, and also my test results, which are not in this build. But if let's take an iOS for just for fun. This build definition is solely for uploading to Test Cloud. Like I said, that integrates nicely as well. So if you go into this, then you actually see a little bit of different dashboard because it focuses on the tests right away, probably because something failed here, so that needs your attention. And you also see that your build has partially succeeded because actually building has succeeded, but running the tests has give some failure.
Question?
Yeah.
I got a question came in that says, can you make the publish artifact integrate with HockeyApp for channel distribution?
Yeah, actually it will. I'm going to go into that in the other part about continuous delivery. So I'm gonna come back to that. I'll show you in a little bit.
Thank you.
Actually, this is already delivering your artifacts to Test Cloud. If you yeah, so let me quickly show you this definition. It isn't very exciting. It's just activating the license again, building, and here you see the bit more configured Test Cloud that we saw before. I also pick up the DSIM files, so the debug symbols, which is only for iOS, and this all gets uploaded to Test Cloud. So if we were to look at Test Cloud real quickly, you here see our app again for iOS, and you see it failed a couple of times, and you have the same results like right here, but these results get reported back to VSTS as well. So you can look into it here, and you could click through to Test Cloud and see some more detail why your test failed. So that integrates really well, and I think it's only getting better. I've seen some demos with where these test results are already shown on your VSTS dashboard. So that's really cool. Okay. So there's one thing we learned from this already, because like I said, we had this CI build set up, and it, basically every time we checked in, there was also a new beta version, which is like in the continuous delivery mindset. That's great, but there are, being this a side project, you don't want to have any builds if nothing really happened. So we were checking in code, and we were every 5 minutes we got a new version, and we were saying, okay, maybe that's a little bit much. So we took the delivery into a nightly one. So now every night we get a new version, but not with every check-in. But that's really all up to you, how you want to configure it, and you can make all kind of variations for that. It's very flexible.
Before we leave this, one last quick question just came in. So the when you're doing the Xamarin part of the build, there was like an activate, deactivate, I think the licensing steps. The question is why is that necessary if Xamarin's free now to build? Is that just a legacy of?
Yeah, actually, I think I just made a new build definition, and it's still in there by default. So it probably is a legacy thing. Well, let me just check it now live. I'm feeling adventurous. So here, this little box here, this is a control box every build step has. So if you think, okay, I want to continue an error because it's not really an important build step, because maybe you're just cleaning up something, it doesn't really have to fail on that. You can turn that on or something, but it also enables you to just click it off here, and then you have to save it. And well, let's just see what happened when we don't activate the license. Then we'll see quick enough if it still works or not. So what you see happening now is triggering an actual build. This also works while you are away. If I were to close this, then it works as well. And this is actually what happens when I check in code for now. So again, this should look familiar because this is exactly the same output that you're getting in your Visual Studio output window. And as we can see, we don't need to activate and deactivate our Xamarin license because it works perfectly fine.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay. And just to note again, you see it again here, the Mac Mini. Also, my Android build runs on there, probably because I was lazy and it was set up already. It should run on the hosted agents as well, I think. I'm not completely sure. But what you see happening right now is that I triggered a build in VSTS. It got sent over to my Mac Mini over here, and it sent the results back here. So it went really quickly. Of course, there is some performance drop because it's going halfway across the world, so it wouldn't be as fast as if it was all in the same place, but it's pretty fast as well. Oops. Yeah. Okay. So continuous deployment. Like I said, I have even in the slides. I'm not very consistent. I'm sorry. So deployment is always a tedious thing to do because I don't know how it is with you guys, but at our place, then the guy which is going to deploy our stuff comes at our desk, and we have to be backup, available for calls, because they never get it right at once, because you always forgot this one config file edit that you didn't supply him with, or whatever. So it's really a hard thing to do. And the weird thing is that deploying from development to test to acceptation, we can all do that automatically. That can all be automated. That's fine. But if we go to production, then we want a human to control that. And basically, I don't understand that, because that's like not the smartest thing to do, because machines don't make mistakes. If there's a mistake in your deployment process, you fix it, and if you run it 1,000 times after that, it will just follow those steps and it will all be all right. If you put a human between that, he had a bad morning, his coffee was bad, and he makes mistakes. So he forgets something and your deployment is gone. It doesn't work right. So don't be afraid to deploy to production as well. That's all I'm going to say. And it always comes, management can come to your desk as well, and they want to demo the new features in your app like right now. And you're knee deep in some developments, and you have to roll back like half of it to get a version which is demoable. This can help you with all that. So also, if you're a bit like me, then everything you have to do more than once, then you going to automate it. So why not with deployment? For this as well, you get early feedback, not just from a technical perspective, is my stuff working, etc. But you also can collect feedback from the end users if you want to go that far. If you distribute versions to your end users, they can provide you with feedback like, oh, I don't like that color, or the button may be better here, or this isn't working. You can get that early on in the process and not just work for a year on an app, release it, and then get a storm of bad one-star reviews. That's not what we want. Also, your progress is very visible to end users or management if you're working in a company, and your progress is very visible. So if you're working with like a Scrum method or something, then your actual increments are visible to the management as well. If you would use continuous delivery all the way to the end user, then you can also have earlier benefits, because you have this minimum viable product that you're shipping out, and you're adding value to it with every increment that you deploy to your end users as well. You can also, combined with that, you can quickly respond to change. If there's another company which is copying your features, then you can throw everything around and quickly put that in your app as well and deliver it in one click, which makes way for some innovation. Also, like I said before, continuous delivery doesn't mean that you have to deliver everything to production as soon as possible. I saw this tweet. It just means that you can deploy it whenever you want. If you think, hey, you wake up one morning and you think, yes, today is the day I'm going to do it, you can deploy the version that you deem viable, and you can send it out into the world just like that. I've even seen what you will be able to see how powerful this is. Just recently, I saw a presentation from a company which let their developers actually experiment on the production product. They had such a good continuous integration and deployment pipeline set up that they just had the Git branches for developers who just think, okay, today I'm going to try something completely wild. They could put a branch up on it, and whatever they published to it was actually deployed to production right away. They set it up in a way that 90% would go to the master branch, so the stable version, and maximum of 10% of the users would go to well, the experimental branches. So how cool is that as a developer if you set this up right? Okay, so what do you need for continuous deployment? Well, you need your app, of course. Continuous integration. Without continuous integration, actually, continuous delivery or deployment doesn't really have any use. You lose all the benefits of that. What is really helpful is a tool like HockeyApp. You can deliver your app with it, and not just that, you can also monitor your app with it. If you do not want to use HockeyApp, you can also use the App Store, the Play Store, Marketplace. They also have beta programs, but they are kind of limited, and they all work just a little bit different from each other. If I take the App Store as an example, you would still have to go through a checking process. Apple still wants to look at your application even if you want to create a beta version. So if you want to quickly push it out to the users, it's kind of hard to do that through the App Store, although it's getting better the last few weeks. But I think it's better to do it in a unified way, collect your feedback in one way through HockeyApp, so your users don't have to get used to a lot of different tools and things. They just have one entry, which is HockeyApp. So how do we set it up? I'm going to show you in a little bit. It's very similar to build definitions, actually. The one thing they did add in the release definitions, that's the continuous delivery part of VSTS. It offers environments. Environments are actually nothing more than a label in which you can specify build steps as well. So you can roll out to HockeyApp in there. You can even run your tests again if that's what you want. But the advantage of using environments is that you can set up a chain of command with it. So I can assign users which have to sign off on release to a certain environment. So let me show you in a little bit. It will become clear. It also supports the same tasks. So again, it's very similar. You can do everything what you did while building and vice versa. And you can automatically set it up if you're brave enough to release your app to the App Store. So yeah, you can use HockeyApp because it's Microsoft now as well, and I think you shouldn't pick too much different tools from different vendors. This integrates all nicely. It's all awesome tools, so just use it. You can distribute like anything you want, your Android, your iOS apps, your Windows apps. It goes outside of the app stores, which brings, of course, some risks with it, but hey, you roll it out yourself, so you know what's doing, right? And you can not only use it for distributing, but you can also use it for getting crash reports to you. So that's very handy as well. What it does is you can collect feedback as well. So not just when the app crashes, but also you can enable users to just send you a bit of feedback like, hey, nice app, but are you sure you want to make your app blue and not red? So that's things they can send back to you as well in a unified way. In support for different target groups, you can assign different roles to user, and you can work with tags and such, so you can provide Group A with version 1 of your app and Group B with version 2, and just do some kind of A/B testing to see what works better and what not. And the upside of all this is that you do not have to wait for the review process. That is especially in when you're creating an Apple application. So okay, how does that look like? Like I said, we have these tabs in the top here. So now we've focused on build. Now we're going to look at release. And here you see similar things already. Here you have these release definitions, like I said. Again, here you can create one, you can import one as well. And if we create one, you can select a template. It's far less than what you saw before. Again, you can create an empty one because you don't see any Xamarin prefabricated templates here. So we're going to have to start with an empty one. But let's have a look at one I've set up already, because an empty one is just that, an empty one. So this looks very similar to what we've seen at the build part of VSTS. Like I said, we have these environments here, which you can add or clone from this one. I've labeled it. It's got one tasks. It's called tasks here. The build steps from before. It's now tasks. And as you see, if I click on it, you see the same categories and the same deprecated packages which are in here. So you can literally do anything that you can do while building as well. So if you want to directly distribute your app from the building process, that's fine. If you want to do everything from here, that's fine too. Like I said, the only advantage you have here is when you set up an environment. I just have one here. You can assign approvers. So that's one of the main advantages here. And you can see you have a couple of configuration settings you want to set up before it's deployed to this environment. In this case, it happens automatically, but I can also specify users. So if I would enter the name of a colleague here, I could say, okay, Stephen is the one who has to approve this deployment, and only then it happens. You also have some more options. You can say that all users have to approve. All users have to approve in the sequential order. So if I were to put Stephen in here and I have another colleague called Ben, then first Stephen would have to approve and then Ben would have to approve, and only then it goes to the next environment, and only then it will get deployed. Or you can say anyone can assign a new deployment, so whichever comes first, and then a new deployment will be made. But you can also do it automatically, and you can also do it post-deployment. So you can also have it first deployed, and then afterwards let someone check it. Maybe you have some tester at your company which have to verify if the deployment worked, and then you can say, okay, it worked, so now deploy to the next environment, which is here in the queue. So there's some other stuff in here, also the variables which you can play with. And also here you can set up the continuous part. So it's always linked to a continuous integration, to a build definition. And you can say, okay, after one is created, then you deploy automatically, or you can do it scheduled. So you first get all the edits up to 3 a.m. in the morning, and then it will get deployed as a whole. Or you can say after the successful deployment on another environment, so if this one succeeded, then it automatically triggers this one as well. So there's some powerful options in here. So if I was to, this already deploys it to my HockeyApp. You have to do some configuration as well. If you haven't seen HockeyApp before, this is it. So you have to create a new app. Here again, it's apparent that there is no Xamarin Forms app. Your Xamarin Forms app will still come down to an Android app and an iPhone app. It will still be two separate apps. While you do share all the code and all the benefits from Xamarin, you still end up with two apps. So I think I was checking the Android one here. So if we go to Android version here, you can see that all these nightly builds also get in here as well. They get distributed to here. And here you see some metrics. It isn't very much used right now. So here you get some statistics from the monitoring. So how much this crashed, downloads, users, sessions, and this all goes automatically. You see these app ID here. which identifies this app. That's what I've configured here in my step, and then it uploads the APK to that HockeyApp app definition. So here you can see all the versions. Also, if there was feedback from the users, I would see that here. So you have it all in one place. That's really awesome. I think events is something that's coming. I'm not going to go into that right now, but I just only noticed it myself. So that's awesome. And then if you would so I have my phone right here. So there's one little downside if you want to distribute iOS apps, because Apple wants to know every device a beta version gets installed to. So what you have to do is collect the device IDs from the beta users that you want to test for you. That's something you cannot get around. You always have to do that, and that means that for every beta user that you want to add, you have to create a new build. But HockeyApp helps you with that. If you have a new user, you can let him go to install hockeyapp.net. You can let him go to here, and you can say install. If I do that, it installs a certificate on my iOS after entering my passcode and such, and then it will report my device ID back to HockeyApp. And if I were to check here in HockeyApp, then oops, I can see my, oh sorry, this is not going to work for Android, of course. I can see my users here, and if I would go to myself, you could see the UDID right here. So this is the ID I have to add to my provisioning profile for my iOS app, and after that, this user, which is me in this case, can install the app through HockeyApp as well.
Got a question?
Yeah.
So now the question just came in. This one's a little bit longer here, so let me just read it to you. If we create multiple environment builds using build configurations in our app solution, do you recommend we use the multi-configuration feature in the build definitions, or would it be better to separate them out by release definition? In other words, is it possible to specify the build configuration differently per release definition?
Yeah, that is something that you could do. It's a matter of taste, actually. You could actually do the multi-configuration build, but for clarity, I would just separate them. So that you have your build reports, your test reports, etc., all in their separate definitions. Because if you would go for the multi-configuration options, then all the outcome would be aggregated into one big result pile, and you would have to go through them and see, is this about my iOS app or my Android app, and where are these results coming from? So in my opinion, you would want to separate them.
Okay, cool. Thank you. One more just came in. Quick one. Is there a maximum number of users for iOS?
I think there is a maximum of 100. Yes, there is a maximum. I think it's 100. I'm not 100% sure, but there is a maximum. But before you're going to hit that, your app should be awesome. So I never hit it until now. Yeah.
All right. Another one. How does your release definition know about the build version you want to release? Makes sense.
Yeah, certainly. Okay, that is something you can configure for yourself with these environments. Because, okay, this one goes to HockeyApp and it goes all automatically. But if I were to say, okay, this does not go automatically, here are the deployment conditions, no automated deployment, and I save this at the time that a new deployment can be made, you have to go in here and say manually, okay, I want to release this one. Or if this is one environment and you're okay with this going to HockeyApp, but you want to create a new environment, which is empty, and do not deploy automatically. So I would have to deploy manually if I do this. Select Queue agent, and I would go in here. This is actually something I wanted to show as well, because there is no step by default to publish it to the Android store. But there is actually an extension, so this is where you see the use of the extensions already. You can go out and create them yourself if it isn't there already. So it's called the Play Store. If you were to look for it, and you can see, oh, there's multiple already. So you can just install this Google Play step, and which enables me to do it to the right account, yes. Okay, this takes a second or two. Okay, so let me explain this while it's working here. What we're going to see in a minute is that the step to release it to the Play Store is going to show up here, which should be now. There we go. There's actually some other stuff you can do here, but if I just add the Google Play release, so there's some other stuff that you have to configure here, which should be pretty straightforward. You can, so I'm sorry. Whenever the HockeyApp one succeeds and you configure this to not go automatically after this one succeeds, you would get a notification, and you would have to come in here and say, okay, now I want to release this version to, well, whatever you have specified here. In this case, it would go to my Google Play production account. So then you have full control over which version goes to production or not, or you can just say, okay, not this one, skip this release. Okay, so to continue with the bit of HockeyApp, whoops. After a user has installed this one and you as a developer have taken this UDID into the provisioning profile for the app, you can now go to the HockeyApp dashboard, because when you install it, it automatically lets you create an account. So I can see all the apps that I actually have here in my account as well. But well, only the iOS one makes sense here. So if I would tap on that one, then you can see, well, it's kind of like App Store-like, right? So I can see what changed in this version if I had entered it. I can see the history, so you can see all my nightly builds here, which all of them don't have release notes, and I can submit my feedback here if I want to. So I could say, hi, great app, and that should show up in my dashboard. But I can also, this is weird because I haven't even installed it and I'm knowing it's great already. So maybe I'm a little biased. So I install it now and it says, okay, you should see it on your Springboard right now. So if I go back in the lower right, you can see it's loading. So it's installing right now, right outside of the App Store. While it's doing that, let me check if I have any new feedback here. Oh, wow, great. Someone who likes our app. Oh, that's awesome. So it's all just integrated really nicely. And you can also have this feedback. I don't have it configured right now, but usually your feedback will be some kind of bug or something. So you can set up this feedback to automatically create a work item in your VSDS as well. So that's really great. You have your feedback from your users right back in VSDS, and you can check in code and associate your work items with it. So as you can see now, we have this app right here. We can start it, and I have a new version which I can test and provide feedback on. Okay, so that's really great. For iOS, it looks kind of the same. It's a bit no, it's actually not different because we're deploying to HockeyApp. There's this one thing. While Google has the actual ability, the API to provide an APK file directly to the Play Store, iOS doesn't have that kind of thing yet. I hope they will in some future, but I'm not sure. You have to go through the application loader right now, and seeing Google's history, they're not really happy about opening up that kind of thing, but who knows, maybe some extension will show up created by one of you to deploy my app to the App Store right away. So actually that kind of is my story. So here are some useful links. Of course, if you don't have an account already, visualstudio.com, sign up for a VSDS account. It's free up to 5 users, I think, from the top of my head. Also, if you have a MSDN license, then those accounts don't count toward the 5 user accounts, so you can work with all your colleagues. HockeyApp, free as well. I think you can create 2 apps for free. So if you have one app and an Android and an iOS version, that counts as 2 apps. Above that, there are some plans which you have to pay a little money, but it will pay itself back by the ease of using the ease of distributing your app through to your end users. Also, Test Cloud, didn't really go into that, but it's awesome. Go check it out. It's really powerful. And there are some blog posts on the bottom by myself about this subject as well. So I'll send over these slides to Mark by the end of this session, so you can check these links for yourself. It's bit.ly CICD -1, 2, and 3 for your convenience. So thank you for your attention, and I hope you have learned something from all this and that you were enthusiastic to go out there and try it all for yourself. Like I said before, please reach out to me and let me know what you thought about this session. And Mark, are there any more questions at the end?
Nope, your question window is clear. Thank you very much, Gerald, and thank you everyone for attending.